The room is quiet except for the buzzing of a cheap fluorescent light overhead. You sit at a plastic table inside a warehouse office somewhere near the border. Dust floats through the air. The man across from you slides a folder across the table. Inside are shipping routes, phone numbers, license plates. If these routes are real, the trucks moving tonight will carry millions of dollars in drugs. The man watches you carefully. Everything here stays inside the family, he says. You nod. But what he doesn't know is that none of this belongs to the cartel. It belongs to the FBI case file waiting back in Washington. Because tonight, you're not just another worker inside the cartel. You're an undercover agent trying to survive inside one of the most dangerous criminal hierarchies in the world. And if you want to stay alive long enough to gather evidence, you need to understand how that hierarchy actually works. Most people imagine cartels as chaotic organizations built entirely on violence. But investigators who study them closely see something different. Cartels operate through structured systems of ranks, responsibilities, and promotions. Just like corporations, just like military organizations, every person inside the system has a role. Some watch the streets, some move the drugs, some enforce discipline. Others manage logistics, money, and territory. And at the very top are leaders who control operations that stretch across entire regions. You don't start anywhere near the top. No one does. Everyone begins at the bottom of the ladder, where trust is minimal and workers are easily replaced. That's where your story begins too. You arrive in a neighborhood controlled by the cartel. Your introduction comes through someone already connected to the organization. Maybe an informant, maybe a cooperating witness, maybe someone looking for quick money. You're presented as someone looking for work, someone who needs cash, someone willing to follow orders. At this level, nobody cares about your ambitions. They care about two things: whether you show up and whether you keep your mouth shut. Your first tasks are small: watching a street corner, delivering a message, waiting in a car outside a warehouse. You're not trusted with anything important yet. But inside cartel culture, reliability matters. Someone notices when you don't complain. Someone notices when you stay calm under pressure. And slowly, small tasks turn into larger responsibilities. That's how people begin moving up the ladder. But here's something most people outside the system never realize. Cartels don't promote people simply because they're ruthless. They promote people who are useful, people who can move product, people who can manage logistics, people who can keep operations running without attracting attention, because at its core, a cartel isn't just a gang. It's a business built around illegal supply chains. And like any business, it relies on a hierarchy. At the bottom are workers who watch and move product. In the middle are operators who coordinate shipments and territory. At the top are leaders who decide where the organization expands, who it fights, and how profits are distributed. Understanding that ladder is the key to understanding how the entire system survives. And for you, as an undercover agent trying to stay alive inside it, understanding the ladder might be the difference between finishing the investigation and never leaving the cartel at all. Because the first step upward is about to begin. And at the very bottom of the cartel hierarchy, your job is simply to watch. The first role you're trusted with inside the cartel is the simplest one. It's also the most disposable. Level 1, halcón. Lookout. The word halcón means hawk. The job is exactly what it sounds like. You watch. Cartels rely heavily on surveillance. Entire neighborhoods can function as early warning systems designed to detect police, soldiers, or rival traffickers before they get close to valuable shipments or stash houses. Halcones are the people who provide that warning. Most of them stand on corners, rooftops, or near highway entrances. Some sit inside convenience stores pretending to scroll through their phones. Others drive slowly around neighborhoods, noting unfamiliar vehicles. Your responsibility is simple. You see something unusual. You call someone higher up the chain, a police convoy, a military patrol, a suspicious stranger asking questions. You report everything. The pay is small compared to higher ranks, usually $200 to $500 a week, but in many neighborhoods that still exceeds legal job opportunities. The real reason people accept this role isn't just money. It's proximity to power. Working as a lookout is often the first step toward deeper involvement in the organization. Micro scenario. You're leaning against a metal fence outside a mechanic shop. Traffic moves slowly past the intersection. Then you notice something different. 3 unmarked SUVs driving together. You recognize the pattern immediately. Federal agents often travel like that. You step away from the fence, pull out your phone, and quietly send a message. 3 vehicles heading north. Within minutes, the warehouse 2 streets away shuts down its operation. The danger at this level is constant. Lookouts are the first people arrested during raids. They're also the first people punished if something goes wrong. If law enforcement arrives without warning, leadership assumes someone failed to report it. Sometimes that failure ends with dismissal. Sometimes it ends much worse. But if you prove reliable, if you show up every day and respond quickly, you might be offered a different job. A job that involves moving the product itself. Level 2, Burrero. Courier. Inside cartel terminology, a burrero is a mule. Someone responsible for physically transporting drugs. Shipments move constantly between cities, stash houses, and border crossings. Every movement requires drivers who are willing to take risks. That's where burreros come in. Some transport drugs in hidden vehicle compartments. Others carry packages across short distances inside cities. In certain smuggling routes, couriers even swallow sealed capsules before boarding flights. Payments vary depending on the job. A small delivery inside a city might earn $1,000. A cross-border run can bring $5,000 or more. But the risk rises dramatically. Couriers are the most visible part of the operation. If a traffic stop turns into a search, the drugs are found in your vehicle, not in the hands of the people who ordered the shipment, which means prison sentences often fall on couriers first. Micro scenario. You're driving a pickup truck north along a desert highway. The hidden compartment beneath the truck bed holds 30 kilograms of cocaine. Up ahead, you see flashing lights. A highway patrol officer waves traffic into a checkpoint lane. Your hands tighten on the steering wheel. Your entire future now depends on whether the officer decides to search your truck. Inside the cartel, surviving this level earns attention. Reliable couriers are valuable. They prove they can handle pressure. They prove they won't panic. And eventually someone decides you're capable of something more dangerous. Something that involves protecting shipments instead of just driving them. That's when you start meeting the people who enforce the cartel's rules. At some point inside the cartel hierarchy, transportation stops being the main concern. Control becomes more important. Control over territory, control over shipments, control over people. That's where the next level appears. Level 3, Sicario, enforcer. The word Sicario translates roughly to hitman or enforcer. But the job isn't always about killing. Most of the time, it's about maintaining order inside cartel territory. Sicarios guard stash houses. They escort drug shipments. They intimidate rivals. They enforce discipline among lower-ranking workers. Their presence alone can stabilize an operation. A single armed escort vehicle can prevent robberies or interference from competing organizations. Sicarios typically earn $2,000 to $10,000 per month, depending on experience and the scale of the cartel. The money increases because the risk increases. Violence becomes part of the job, and violence attracts attention from law enforcement and rival groups. Micro scenario. You're riding in the passenger seat of an armored SUV, traveling behind a cargo truck loaded with narcotics. Your job is simple. If anyone tries to stop the shipment, you respond first. Halfway down the highway, a rival vehicle suddenly appears behind the convoy. The driver beside you grips the steering wheel and says quietly, "Stay ready." That tension becomes normal at this level, because violence inside cartel structures isn't random. It's strategic. Sicarios protect the organization's assets. They ensure workers obey orders. They also prevent infiltration. Cartels constantly worry about informants and undercover investigators, which means enforcers sometimes monitor the behavior of other members. Anyone acting suspiciously can be questioned, sometimes violently. Promotion from this level usually depends on loyalty and competence. Enforcers who demonstrate leadership ability, who can organize teams, manage schedules, or coordinate protection for large shipments, begin attracting the attention of mid-level managers. Those managers run the operational heart of the cartel, and they need people who can handle complex logistics. As you move deeper into the organization, the structure becomes clearer. Cartels divide territory into regions called plazas. Each plaza functions almost like its own company branch. Shipments move through it. Money flows through it. Violence is managed inside it. And overseeing that entire operation requires coordination. Level 4, Plaza Operator. A plaza operator manages the day-to-day functioning of cartel operations inside a specific territory. Instead of watching streets or guarding trucks, your job now involves planning. You coordinate shipments arriving from suppliers. You assign couriers to move drugs through safe routes. You monitor stash houses and security teams. You also manage relationships with corrupt officials who allow operations to continue without interference. At this level, income can reach $50,000 to $200,000 per year, sometimes far more depending on the size of the territory. But the responsibility multiplies. If a shipment gets seized by police, leadership wants answers. If rival groups move into the plaza, leadership expects a response. If workers fail to follow orders, the blame moves upward. Micro scenario, you're sitting inside a safe house reviewing 3 shipping routes on a map. One route crosses a border checkpoint that has recently increased inspections. Another route passes through rival territory. The third route is longer, but quieter. The decision you make tonight determines whether millions of dollars reach their destination or disappear into evidence lockers. But here's something most people outside the cartel world never realize. Violence isn't the primary skill that keeps someone at this level. Logistics is. Running a plaza requires managing schedules, transportation networks, communications, and finances. It's less like running a street gang and more like managing an illegal supply chain, which means the next step up the hierarchy isn't about guns, it's about leadership. Once you begin managing operations across an entire territory, you're no longer just coordinating shipments. You're coordinating people, multiple teams, multiple operations, and sometimes multiple cities. Level 5, Lieutenant, Jefe de Grupo. A lieutenant, often called Jefe de Grupo, supervises several operational units within the cartel. These might include security teams, drug transport crews, local distributors, financial collectors. Instead of focusing on individual shipments, your responsibility is maintaining stability across an entire segment of the organization. You ensure workers follow schedules. You resolve conflicts between crews. You report performance and profits to higher leadership. Lieutenants often earn $200,000 to $500,000 per year, sometimes significantly more, depending on the cartel's scale. But with that income comes constant pressure, because every failure travels upward. A seized shipment, an arrested courier, a violent clash with a rival organization. All of those problems eventually land on your desk. Micro scenario, you receive a call just after midnight. A truck carrying narcotics has disappeared between 2 checkpoints. The driver isn't answering his phone. Within minutes, you must decide whether the truck was seized by police or stolen by a rival group. Either answer demands a completely different response. This level of responsibility changes how people inside the cartel think. Street-level workers worry about survival. Lieutenants worry about stability. If operations collapse in their region, leadership assumes poor management, and leadership rarely tolerates failure for long. Those who succeed at this level may eventually be trusted with something even more powerful: control over an entire territory. By the time you reach this level, the hierarchy becomes extremely small. Very few individuals ever gain this much authority, but those who do control enormous sections of the organization. Level 6. Plaza Boss, Jefe de Plaza. The Plaza Boss oversees every cartel activity inside a city or region: drug shipments, security operations, financial flows, relationships with corrupt officials. All of it ultimately answers to the Plaza Boss. Instead of coordinating individual shipments, you now supervise the entire network that moves drugs through your territory. This role can generate millions of dollars annually, but power at this level attracts enemies from every direction. Rival cartels target plaza bosses to destabilize territory. Law enforcement agencies focus investigations on them. Even internal rivals sometimes compete for control. Micro scenario, you're sitting in a guarded compound reviewing financial reports from 3 cities under your control. Profits are strong this month. But one border crossing has become unstable after a new military commander increased inspections. The choice you make now, rerouting shipments or confronting rivals, could shift millions of dollars across the network. Above plaza bosses sits the highest authority in the organization, the person who controls the entire system. Level 7. Cartel leader. El Patron. At the top of the hierarchy sits El Patron, the cartel leader. Unlike lower ranks, the leader rarely handles drugs directly. Their power comes from strategy. They decide which territories expand, which alliances form, which rivals become enemies. They control the long-term direction of the organization. Cartel leaders can accumulate hundreds of millions of dollars through trafficking networks. But life at the top becomes increasingly isolated. Trust disappears, communication is tightly controlled, movement between safe houses becomes constant. Micro scenario: you wake before sunrise in a remote compound surrounded by armed guards. Overnight reports have arrived from several regions. One lieutenant requests reinforcements. Another reports law enforcement pressure increasing near a key smuggling route. Every decision you make today affects thousands of people inside the organization. Reaching this level means controlling enormous power. But power inside the cartel world rarely lasts forever. From the outside, the top of the cartel hierarchy looks like ultimate success. Money, influence, control over massive trafficking networks. But the closer someone gets to the top, the narrower the world becomes. Leaders rarely travel freely. They move between guarded compounds. They rely on layers of security. They trust only a handful of people. And even those relationships remain fragile. Because power inside organized crime attracts constant challenges, rival groups try to take territory, internal factions compete for influence. Law enforcement agencies dedicate years of investigations to identifying leadership structures. The higher someone climbs, the more attention they receive from every direction. And that attention creates pressure. Decisions become larger. Mistakes become more costly. A single failed strategy can trigger conflicts that affect entire regions. Meanwhile, the people at the top must constantly wonder who around them remains loyal. Cartel history is filled with leaders who were betrayed by trusted allies. Some were captured after associates cooperated with investigators. Others were overthrown by rivals within their own organizations. Power inside these hierarchies often brings isolation, and that isolation changes how leaders see the world. They stop thinking in terms of individual workers. They think in terms of territory, routes, profit margins, influence. From that perspective, entire regions become pieces on a strategic map. But the system itself continues long after individual leaders disappear. New lieutenants rise. New operators take control of plazas. New couriers move product along the same roads. The hierarchy rebuilds itself again and again, which is why dismantling these organizations takes years of investigation. It requires understanding the structure from the bottom all of the way to the top. Because only by seeing the ladder clearly can investigators figure out where to apply pressure. And if you were truly inside that system, climbing it step by step, you would eventually realize something important. The higher you rise, the less freedom you actually have. Because power inside the cartel hierarchy comes with a simple rule. The more influence you gain, the more enemies you create. And at the very top of the ladder, there's nowhere left to climb. Only people waiting below.